So the next presenter is Jacinta Smith. Jacinta is someone that we've been fortunate enough to work with on a particular project called the Pragmatic Study, which we'll hear about a bit later on. Jacinta is a member of the CRE Respond Consumer and End User Committee, and she's going to talk to us about meeting the needs of the community through consumer involvement in infectious diseases research.
Thanks, Jacinta. Thank you. So, I'm Jacinta Smith, and I'm here to talk about meeting the needs of the community through consumer involvement in infectious diseases research. Consumer and community involvement. Consumer involvement is now a standard requirement for both research and health service delivery. Consumers have lived experiences that bring understanding and precision to research. Community involvement ensures that research is relevant and responsive to the needs of society. For example, the NHMRC is funded by taxpayers. Infectious diseases research spans bench to bedside, and consumers can add value across this continuum. So this is my background. So this photo here was me shortly before I got diagnosed with AML. I was diagnosed in March 2019 with AML with both the FLT3 and NPM1 mutations. I immediately commenced the 7-3 induction chemotherapy, followed by the midostaurin treatment as a FLT3 inhibitor. This protocol enabled me to achieve remission whilst remaining comparatively fit and well. And once my neutrophils were covered, I was able to go home. My medical team and I were aware that due to the FLT3 mutation, it was imperative to my survival to have a bone marrow transplant. In May, I commenced my first consolidation chemotherapy as an outpatient with a chemotherapy pump attached to my PICC line, with me visiting the hospital every day over 5 days. After this protocol was completed, and while still neutropenic, I contracted an infection which progressed to pneumonia and sepsis. So these photos show me after my induction chemotherapy and before the infection. So as you can sort of see there, I still looked quite well and healthy, and when I went home I was still going for walks and sort of doing most things normally. But then there's the impact of infection. So this photo here shows me after I've come out of ICU because of the infection. So I was taken by ambulance to hospital, and within a couple of hours my condition deteriorated rapidly. I was having great difficulty breathing, even with oxygen, and I was vomiting blood. Within a couple of hours I was taken to ICU with total organ failure and in a comatose state. I was in a coma for 21 days on full life support, and on several occasions my family were told that I probably wouldn't last the night and that the medical staff were reaching the limits of their treatment. My husband was told at one point that I was the most unwell person in the hospital. My family were also warned that I could lose limbs or digits, and there could be permanent lung, kidney and liver damage. That's another photo of me after I've come out of ICU, so still not looking real great. At the end of May, I was able to leave ICU and transfer back to the haematology and bone marrow transplant ward. I was totally deconditioned, and all I could move was my eyes. My weight had dropped by 18 kilos, and I was dizzy and nauseous when the physio team tried to sit me up or support me to be upright. I still required dialysis, oxygen, nasal gastric tube feeding, and had to learn how to breathe properly again. I was still fine. My husband was saying yesterday when I was talking to him about this, he still has to remind me sometimes to breathe properly, because every now and then, even 5 years later, I still breathe like I'm on a ventilator. So it took a long time to get past that. I also needed a catheter and a nappy. I couldn't regulate my temperature properly and could only manage a burns unit style call buzzer if my hand was already placed on it. Once my kidneys and liver had recovered sufficiently and dialysis was no longer required, I was transferred to a geriatric rehabilitation unit for an extended period for the support necessary to regain my mobility. Being there was very stressful for me. It was not a pleasant place to be. It was imperative that I regain my strength, as I needed a transplant before I relapsed. However, the transplant itself would have been too risky while I was in this condition. After a lot of time and hard work to regain my strength and mobility, I was able to transfer back to the haematology and bone marrow transplant ward and have further chemotherapy and eventually go home. Prior to my transplant, I did have another infection. Fortunately, this was resolved with a hospital admission, but did not require any time in ICU. In September, I received my stem cells and I've remained in remission ever since. So this is a couple of photos of me going through that stage. So the one there on the left, that was me being transported once a week. They took me by ambulance from the rehabilitation place back to see the haematologist here to review my condition. And then the one on the right, that was me taking my first steps back walking again. So the importance of managing infections during cancer treatment. From a consumer, carer and community perspective, managing infections is vital. In 2019, I spent more time in hospital than at home, which was very distressing for myself, my family and my friends. Most of this time was as a consequence of my infection rather than for AML treatment. Less patients' days in hospital obviously benefits the community as well. My infection almost took my life. I was extremely fortunate to survive it. And for a period of time, some of the staff referred to me as the miracle lady. 21 days in a coma on full life support with the uncertainty of my survival took a terrible toll on my family and friends. And it's still something that can bring them to tears 5 years later. Actually, just as a aside, because I was running through this last night with my husband, and last night he had a nightmare about me being back in hospital. So it's still definitely there. My time in a coma with the ICU hallucinations was and still is traumatic to me. Triggers reminding me both of this time as well as my long, slow recovery process can be quite distressing. Physical recovery post-treatment, exacerbated by the health issues due to the infection, took a massive effort over a 2.5-year period. And the 23 days in ICU cost the healthcare system around $100,000, as well as the cost of care and additional treatment in RBWH and the CRE rehabilitation unit. So as a consumer advisor in CRE Respond, I contribute to grant submissions. I'm part of the identification of study outcomes that are important to patients, their supports and the community as a whole. I'm involved in the development of protocols. I participate in the study steering committee. I review patient-facing measures and resources, and I'm planned to be in the contribution to patient engagement, data collection and analysis, and the planned dissemination and lay summaries. So that's my story. Thank you for listening.
That's fantastic, Jacinta. This reminds us all why we do this research. And, someone who's spent a lot of time working in the ICU, trying to work out what doses to use, what we're trying to do is to reduce infections, to stop them being so severe that, you spend so much time in the ICU, but also to stop you getting resistant infections, which can be even worse. That's a really powerful story, and thank you very much for sharing that.